also have a guest from Zoom. We have Cindy Junica Simanggungsong, Deputy CEO Policy and Advocacy of Econusa Foundation. Hello, Cindy. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Everyone, thanks for having me.
Hi,
so
Cindy.
Honored to be here.
Happy Independence Day to you.
Happy Independence Day. I'm sorry I don't have any traditional attire, but I do have several traditional hatties from Papua, and the traditional bag as well from Papua.
Oh, but all of us here and you're there, we have a nationalism here, red and white in our hearts, so no worries.
And you are wearing white as well, Cindy, so you are really involved in the national spirit today.
Okay, but
yes, thank you.
But before we continue on with our discussion, it will be a fruitful discussion, I believe. And we would like to also ask Cindy, who is the CEO, Deputy CEO Policy and Advocacy from Econusa, where you are based in Ambon?
No, I'm head-based in Jakarta, but I travel across eastern part of Indonesia.
Okay. And the organization is focusing in Maluku and also Papua.
Yes, correct. Papua and Maluku region. Previously, it was only 4 provinces, but now it consists of 6 provinces.
Okay. Now, can you please share with us how it was built and the story behind it?
Yeah, so Econusa we're proudly national NGOs that we're a non-profit organization, and we focus more on the eastern part of Indonesia, as we've mentioned, Papua and Maluku. Why we focus more on the eastern part of Indonesia, as we see the Indonesian forest in specific. So the eastern part of Indonesia, especially Papua, is the last frontier of Indonesian forest. Almost 40% of Indonesian forests located in Papua. But also, we're also talking about marine and coastal and small islands. And a lot of the fish catch sources are located also in the eastern part of Indonesia. Eastern Indonesia is very rich in natural resources, that if we're not doing anything or we're not doing something ambitiously and with a very big effort now, we might lose everything. Our biggest source of natural resources and forest ecosystem and marine ecosystem in eastern part of Indonesia. And we don't know what will our next generation will have.
That's true, because I was just in Eastern Indonesia. In particular, I was in Labuan Bajo just a couple of months ago, and seeing the beauty of the nature, it was really amazing to see. I went deeper into the forest actually of Labuan Bajo, and these places they are basically untouched, Aisha, because they are very well conserved. But that's right, that Cindy said that they must always be conserved as well, and people must put this at the front of their agenda, because if they don't, then it's just going to be gone. And Cindy, I'm curious, what was your initial initiative? Like, what is the reason that you want to build Econusa in the first place?
Yes, Econusa, our funder is born and raised in Papua. And then his life was filled with activism, sustainability, and so on and so forth. But what happened is, when we see the map of industrial commercialization, exploitation of natural resources, we once have Sumatra, and then we're shifting into Kalimantan. And currently, they're already in Papua. So that raised a lot of concerns, especially personal concerns, that if we're not doing anything about Papua, then Papua will end up the same. While it's still intact forest, we need to save it. But when we're saying we're saving it, it means that we're also making it beneficial So when we're talking about preserving the ecosystem, we can get so much more benefit and impact, especially towards the indigenous people and local communities. So that kind of the story, what happened on the other part of Indonesia that triggers the internal and personal concerns that we need to do something right now, not tomorrow, but actually it should be yesterday, but we still have time to do it.
I'm curious to know what Cindy thinks, especially about the challenges in terms of Econusa as a deputy CEO. What are some setbacks that you face yourself for the natural resource management in Papua and Maluku?
Well, thank you. That's a very interesting but also complex question to answer, actually. When we're talking about Papua, the main thing that usually came to mind, especially for urban citizens, like in Java Island, is that it's a very, left behind region. So the mindset is a very big challenge when we're dealing and we're trying to focus in eastern part of Indonesia. That's the first one, the general perspective and the mindset. But also the second one is also, as I mentioned before, that more than 50% of Papua's and Maluku's land are already granted concession license to industrial scale companies. So that's another challenge. But also the third one, because we need to build the perspective and the mindset of the local community themselves, including the government, that they can do this. They can manage their own natural resources, and we need to make like a clear pathway and assist them in every step of the path until they succeed in doing that. So those are the main challenges of that. Overall, a lot of the regulation, a lot of the practice, they're not being just, as we can say. Not only sustainable, but just is very important, meaning that if they're taking something from Papua's land, the indigenous people's land, then they should also benefit from those resources. But that's also a big problem, that they don't have the most benefit from their own land.
And I think that's an important word that you said, that the fairness of it is important as well, especially when talking about resources. How does Econusa engage with the local communities? As you said before, you want to plant also this this collaboration with the local communities and the government in order for them to wake up to this as well and be able to be involved in Econusa's efforts.
Yeah, well, we're doing everything. We're doing everything in parallel in Econusa. So we have another specific team that's working on the grassroots level, meaning that they're dealing face to face and assisting actively with the local communities and indigenous people. But also, for example, my team, we will, in parallel, working with the government, both in the subnational, national, and also international level. So we're not, like waiting for this to be done and then we're continuing to the other stage. We're doing everything in parallel. Because the logic behind that is when, for example, me, if I want to advocate something about natural resources management regulation into the government, then I need to show them the exact example of the grassroots level community-based project that has been done and succeeded, which means that it needs to be there. But also, in order that to be done and supported by the local government, they need to have like a very clear basis of regulation. So we cannot wait one another. So we're doing everything in parallel. So starting from the grassroots up until the district level, provincial, national, up until the international level. So we're doing it all in a holistic method.
Yeah, so up the chain, it's quite interdependent with everybody. It's a collaborative effort as well.
Yes, it is, because it needs a collaborative efforts both for Ruang Pangan and Econusa.
And now going back to Cindy from Econusa. So Cindy, in terms of the 78th celebration of the Indonesian Independence Day, what reflections do you think can be drawn on the progress made in terms of environmental sustainability as well as natural resources management in the country? I'm sure that you've seen a lot of how things work here in Indonesia. And in our anniversary, what have been something that you've been reflecting on during your time in Econusa?
Yes, thank you. Well, 78 years, we've come through a lot. We've achieved a lot of achievements. I can give you several examples. Like at the beginning of last year, 2022, the Minister of Forestry and Environment issued the revocation of more than 3 million hectares of the forestry licenses. That's a very good example, and that's a very high achievement that we've made so far. And also, if you remember 2019, we had those moratorium on the oil palm concessions and also moratorium on logging companies and on the energy exploitation as well. So those are a very good example that we've achieved so far, and we need to embrace those positive results that we've achieved. But also, it does not mean that we still have we've done our work. We still have so many things that we need to do. As you can see on the video, mangroves lost a lot of its cover during the time. And that needs a lot of people, a lot of multi-stakeholders. So multi-stakeholders need to get together and do even bigger action. So what I see is that what we really want in the future is not only sustainable, but also just and equitable, meaning that not only a small portion of people or group or companies that might benefit from our very rich natural resources, but also mainly the local communities and indigenous people when we're talking about Eastern Papua, eastern part of Indonesia. And that has been said, we can learn so much from Papua, especially that they have so many valuable local wisdom. When we're saying about conservation, they have a lot of traditional values in conserving their forest and ecosystem. But we're really hoping that we could have a just and sustainable management of natural resources, not only on the practical level, which needs to be supported by the regulation and followed up by a very good and rigid enforcement of those regulation and policies. So siding to the local communities and indigenous people on the natural resources management.
And how about you, Cindy? Do you have any message? What are your messages for the Indonesians, and if it's in regard with the Indonesian Independence Day, how we can move forward and become a better Indonesia?
Well, yeah, we need to work together. I mean, we're at the edge of this is a climate crisis. It's not just a climate change now, it's a crisis. I mean, in Econusa, we've done our best and we will still continuing our job. I mean, we've had already more than 170 examples pilots for local initiatives conducted in more than 170 villages that will show how we could be, when we're talking about independence, how local communities, especially indigenous people, could be resilient and also independent, starting with their own food. So that starts with that. But also when we're talking about the youth, as we know, the upcoming general election 2024, 60% of the voters will be young generation, millennials and Gen Z.
Yep.
So that would create a very important role for the young generation. In Econusa, we have this a lot of programs specified for young generation. So we've gathered more than 22,000 youth every year for this national AMJI. It's called AMJI, Aksi Muda Jaga Iklim. And we've managed to let me check my data. More than 5,000 trees planted, more than
Wow.
5,000 mangrove planted as well, and more than 12 tons of trash collected. But that also needs to come to our own personal. As you asked me in the very first beginning of the interview, each of us need to find our own concern.
Yep.
What is our personal concern, and start from that point. If your concern is as ruang pangan, if your concern is food waste, then do something about it. If you're concerned about advocacy, then you can start be critical to the government or make a video on something that you see injustice or unfair, and also a lot of things. But on the upcoming election, for example, choose the right leader. Like, you're the one who's gonna experience everything related to any policies and regulation from that. So that sums up what our hopes is. And please, young generations, do not think that you're voiceless. Do not think that you cannot do anything, or it does not matter how try you hard, that you can do, and you are destined to do a lot of change. You are the agent of change of Indonesia, and you're the future leader.
Yes,
Wow.
even though the main focuses might be different between Econusa and also Ruang Pangan, but there's a silver lining for the sustainability, and that's what we hope that Indonesia can move forward as well. So thank you again, Azara Sefta Soleha, the CEO of Ruang Pangan, and also Cindy Simangungsong, Deputy CEO Policy and Advocacy from Econusa.